right? When you can have a quality of life that meets or exceeds your current quality of life in England or the United States or Germany, and you can have it for the same money, or in most cases a lot less, right? Those are very high motivating factors for people to look at living overseas, and it's already happening. It's not going to happen; it's already happening, but the pace of it happening is increasing rapidly.
Welcome to the Bricks and Banks podcast, where real estate meets real wealth. Whether you're building from the ground up or stacking your paper to the ceiling, Steph breaks down property power plays and money moves you can act on. From first-time buyers to seasoned investors, this podcast is your blueprint for financial freedom through real estate, business, and investment. Subscribe now. It's time to build your future. This is Bricks and Banks with Steph.
Before we dive into the conversation, I want to let you know that this episode is a paid partnership with BetterHelp. You know what's interesting? We all have these patterns in our lives. The ways we react when we are stressed out, hurt, or disappointed. Maybe shutting people out or walking yourself into exhaustion. Or that voice in your head that says you're not good enough. For me, it's shutting people out. And here is the thing. We know that these patterns aren't helping us. We can see them clearly, but breaking them, that's a completely different story. I used to think I could just power through on my own, that time will heal everything, or I just needed to be stronger. But the truth is, some cycles are nearly impossible to break on your own. Not because you're weak, but because you're so close to see the full picture. That's why having outside support, real professional support, becomes a game changer. When you have someone who is trained to help you understand why these patterns exist and give you actual tools to help change them, everything shifts. You're not just surviving anymore, you're actually on your path to healing. That's why I'm partnering with BetterHelp today. BetterHelp is on a mission to make starting therapy easier. They will connect you with a credentialed therapist who is trained to listen to you and give you helpful, unbiased advice, ensuring confidentiality throughout the process. You just get to fill out a questionnaire and you'll be matched with a therapist as soon as possible. And if that's not the right fit, don't fret. You can easily switch therapists at any time at no extra cost. To get started, head on to betterhelp.com/bricksandbanks. That is betterhelp.com/bricksandbanks to get 10% off your very first month of therapy. I'll make sure to leave a link in the description so you can get right on. Breaking the cycle starts with one step, and this could be yours. Going to therapy is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength. BetterHelp makes therapy simple with 10% off your first month of therapy to help you get started. So what are you waiting for? Remember, you don't have to do this alone. A problem shared is a problem half solved. And we are live. Hey everyone, welcome to another amazing episode of the Bricks and Banks podcast. Today I am joined with a very special guest, all the way from just outside Washington, D.C. is Michael Cobb. Michael Cobb is the chairman and CEO of ECI Development. That's a company that has created people-centered communities across Belize, Nicaragua, Panama, and beyond. He's helped thousands of experts, investors, and families turn the idea of living or investing abroad into a practical, profitable reality. And guess what? He has a book on that. So it's not just fluff talk. He has a book. He has written it out. He has lived that life and he has a book to give us a guide. So whether you're exploring Plan B, looking at international diversification, or dreaming a lifestyle that isn't limited by borders, Mike brings a rare blend of experience, clarity, and on-the-ground wisdom. Michael, it's a privilege to have you on the pod. Welcome today.
Stephanie, glad to be here. Really, it's exciting. And as we talked about before we got on, I think it's wonderful what you're doing for your listeners, bringing real experts to the table to talk about the kinds of things that are important, but at a level that offers depth and nuance not just a bang, bang, bang across the top. I think so many videos out there today, and so much information is just sort of the very tippy tops of things, but it never gets down into the roots of things where the real information is so important, especially when we're doing due diligence on investments, right? We want to make sure that we
Yeah.
have the complexities, we understand the complexities, not the sound bites. Sound bites are great, but the complexity and the nuance is where we make it or break it in the investment world. And your listeners are very fortunate to have you bringing people who can really go deep in the topics for them, with them. So thank you. Yeah.
That's amazing. So I titled today's episode The Future of Living Abroad: Real Estate,
Okay.
Freedom, and Investing with Michael Cobb. And I know that like you've lived this life, you've done it for over 33 years. But
Yeah.
how was it as a start for you? Like, is this what you've always set out to do real estate and doing it on the international level? Or you started out doing something entirely different? What was your upbringing and your childhood like?
Yeah, well, great question. So, as a child, I traveled quite a
Yeah.
bit. My father was a college professor, and we
Okay.
spent, I think, 6 or 7 summers in Europe during my childhood.
Oh,
He was teaching in
nice.
Salzburg, Austria, and so we would go to Salzburg for maybe a 5 or 6 week program, and then we would spend a couple weeks before or after traveling throughout Europe. And then at one point, my father did a sabbatical in what was then Yugoslavia, and I lived in Yugoslavia as a fifth grader for 4 months, went to school there, and so had this incredibly, I think, powerful, transformative expat experience, as a 10 or 11-year-old kid, right? So there was, so certainly travel and overseas experience has been a part of my life since I can remember. So yeah, I think it probably does stem from childhood. I've always been very adventurous, but right out of college, I was in the computer business for 12, almost 13 years, and
Wow.
still did traveling as fun, but was professionally involved in the computer industry in the Washington, D.C. area. But then eventually, began to look at opportunities overseas, and now for the last 33 years have been full time working overseas, and 14 of those years living as an expat in Nicaragua
Oh.
with my wife and my 2 daughters. Kind of a very well-rounded set of experiences that we bring to the table for folks looking at either living overseas or investing overseas, or both. Many times people do both. So
Oh, you're basically living the dream because you get
yes,
to live across
yes,
different countries, do business everywhere, and speak everywhere. And
right.
basically, you recognized a gap decades ago between the fantasy of living abroad and the reality of executing it. So, what was happening in your life at the time that made you pause to say, okay, I want to take this to the next level. I don't want to be limited by location?
Yeah. Well, it was really almost accidental, Stephanie.
Yeah.
I had a college buddy who called me up. I was working in the computer business in Springfield, Virginia, which is a Washington, D.C. suburb. And, he called me up on a Tuesday doing, I'm just sitting in my office, and he says, "Hey, what are you doing what are you doing Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday?" And I said, "I don't know why." He says, "Do you want to go to Belize?" And I'm like,
Hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. But Stephanie, I had no idea where Belize was. I didn't even care. I'm just like,
Same here.
yeah, we're going. Let's go. And
Hey everyone. All right, listen up. If you're a UK homeowner or landlord, you're going to want to hear this. I just partnered with Utility Warehouse, and honestly, I wish I'd knew this sooner. Here's the tea. Utility Warehouse is the only place where you can bundle your energy, mobile, and home insurance into one simple monthly bill. No more juggling 5 different logins. No more surprise hikes, no more bill headaches. But the best part, most people actually save money just by switching, like without doing anything fancy. Quick highlights: you can save up to £276 in a year and cash back every time you shop. That's about up to 10%. Up to £150 welcome credits. If you're stuck in a contract, they'll pay you up to £400 to help you switch. Winter bills are about to slap everyone, but not you, if you move smart. So here's what I'm doing. I'm offering a free utility consultation to show you exactly what you could save by switching to Utility Warehouse. Click the link in the description and see how much you can save. Let's put money in your pocket this winter. Don't sleep on this because your bills definitely wouldn't. Cheers.
anyway, and yeah, and it's interesting. I hear you said you were in London, but
Yeah.
Belize was for for a couple hundred years British Honduras, right? It was part of it was a colony up until 1981. It became it got its independence. It became Belize, still a member of the Commonwealth. The Queen is on the money, of course, is part of the Commonwealth. So and so I'd studied it in high school and college as British Honduras, not Belize. But I went to Belize with him, and it was really just fun for me. But we started to see opportunities. I started to see ways that we could serve a North American consumer. First of all, I bought a condo, and this was long before Airbnb. I put an ad in the back of the Washington Post newspaper, said, "Hey, I've got a condo in Belize, $800 a week or whatever it was." And we, had a phone number, and people would call me, and we'd, mail them the keys, physically mail them the keys. It is incredible. And, they would go and stay in the condo for a week, mail me my keys back. And that's really how I got involved in the business. But that evolved into other things, very, very quickly. But I'll stay with the question you asked. How did I get from working in the computer business to something else? It was purely by accident, but it was by saying yes. I can't remember where I was recently, and I was talking. No, I was at a conference, and one of our speakers was Cheryl Hines, the woman who's the actress on the name of the program. But anyway, it'll come to me anyway. But she's an actress, and she was talking about her life and have fun and how saying yes was really important. And I know saying yes has always been really, really important to me as well. And so I asked her, I said, "Well, what's the most important yes that you've ever said?" And she said it was getting married to her husband, which I thought was a great answer. But I think saying yes that was a good answer. Saying yes is a powerful thing, right? When opportunities in life come along, if we're adventurous and we're willing to say yes to them, then wonderful things can happen. And we don't know where the path will lead necessarily. Maybe we see the direction, but serendipity is tremendous and wonderful. And for me, saying yes to a trip to Belize with my old college roommate was really fortuitous in the sense that it took me down many paths, new paths, exciting paths, adventurous paths that have been truly wonderful, both emotionally, spiritually, financially, of course, but also for the family in ways that, to be able to raise my daughters overseas in another culture, what a tremendous gift that is for them. So in so many ways, saying yes, that Tuesday way back in 1993, has transformed my life in really wonderful, positive ways.
I mean, yes, saying yes is very important because it opens your mind. The very first book I read on finance, which is Rich Dad Poor Dad, he said, "Don't say I can't afford it. Say, how can I afford it?" So it's sort of saying yes to things. Because once you say no, or once you shut your mind to what's happening, it's dead and gone. You lose the opportunity. But when you say yes, you give yourself the grace to try, and you tried it, and now you're living that dream, and you're making so much money out of it. Let's talk about
well,
your.
and
Yeah,
by the way,
no problem.
I think that book has transformed so many lives. I read it much later. In fact, I knew the Kiyosaki, had heard the Rich Dad Poor Dad, but I'd never read the book until I was on a cruise, and he and I were speakers on the same cruise. It was a wealth cruise, and we were, and so we had time together. We had like speaker cocktail where it was just the speakers, and we got to know the other speakers, and then we had just other times that we were together, and got to talk to him about his book and just about his life, and but that book has truly, like it did for you and for millions of other people, transformed their lives in really powerful, wonderful ways. Kiyosaki's just he's a great guy, and but the book is powerful and transformative, and funny that it was what you kind of flipped on as well. So that's great.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's an amazing book, and you basically met a legend. It means you're a legend of yourself, because for you to be on the same platform as the people we've come to know and love, it shows the quality of person you are. There's a quote that says, "Work hard so that your heroes become your competitors," so to speak. You guys are not competitors in any way, but you guys are on the same platform. So that's how much you've worked, put yourself on that pedestal, and it's It goes to show the quality of person you are and how much you've grown in your field. And let's talk about your company, ECI Development. What does the company do, and what's the problem you're trying to solve with this global brand?
Sure. Well, ECI was our second business. The first business that we started was a mortgage company in late
Okay.
1993 and into 1994 in Belize. And there's a reason I'm giving this as a lead into the ECI. What we found was that the developers in Belize at the time really had a big problem, and the problem was they were building condominiums or homes, whatever it was, but condominiums in the first case, and they would sell them to North Americans, U.S. and Canadians. The problem was that an American coming down to Belize wanting to buy a condo would think, oh, I'm going to put 20% down, 30% down, I'm going to finance the rest. That's the American real estate model, right? Canadian real estate model. And so the developers, on the other hand, they wanted all the money. But the real fundamental problem in the marketplace was that no bank in Belize would lend a foreigner money, and no bank in the United States would lend money on a condo collateral in Belize. And so you had this big disconnect in the marketplace, right? You had developers who wanted to sell product, you had consumers that wanted to buy product, but this financing piece in the middle was missing. And so my business partner and I started a finance company, a little mortgage company, to loan money to North Americans who wanted to buy properties in Belize. And that was our first market need that we saw and we served, right? So, and I do believe in the service model, right? The solution, find a problem, solve the problem, serve the client. That's a good business model. And that's what we did. My business partner, he's a lawyer, and so he was the contracts, deal, money, paperwork guy. I'm really a boots on the ground kind of guy. So my job was to go look at the collateral. So does the condo or home really exist? Yes. Is it built out of concrete? Yes. Will it withstand a hurricane? Yes. Right? I mean, just check the boxes on the collateral. And so what I found very quickly was that even if a building was well built out of concrete, it had met the hurricane standards and things like that, it did not meet a North American's expectation. And I'll give you a couple examples. This is 1994 at this point, and so I didn't have a phone with picture. I mean, now we all carry a camera around with us, but back then, we didn't have a camera, right? So I remember walking into this one condominium, again, well built, like structurally well built. But I walk in the front door, there's one outlet on one of the walls in the living room. There's two outlet strips with extension cords plugged into the outlet strips to run around to outlet strips so they could get power the whole way around this living room, because there was only one outlet in the living room, right? I remember the door handles were all at different heights. The light in the bathroom was behind instead of in front. So like when you stood there, like your face was in a shadow, right? The countertops I think they were too low, and like the stools, like you tried to slide your knees underneath and it would bang your knees. And so as we looked at these issues in this condominium, and we just said to ourselves, like, all of this stuff is free to fix. It doesn't cost any more money to put the light here over where it's supposed to be. It doesn't cost any money to put all the door handles at the right height, the same height, the right height, the countertops at the right height. So it costs a little bit of money to add some electrical outlets, like 3 more electrical outlets in the living room, right? And maybe 2 more in the bedrooms, whatever. So that might have cost $100, right? But like for almost no money or free, we could deliver a product to a client that would meet their expectations, a North American client. And that's how we got into the development business. We said, look, here's another problem we can solve, right? And so in 1996, we started our development company, ECI Development, but it really evolved from the first problem, which was providing mortgages and seeing that need. The second need, US standard product, North American standard product for a North American client in the region. And that was really the evolution of our business, from owning a condo, doing Airbnb before there was Airbnb, to financing, to the actual development itself.
So you guys incorporated the company in Belize, or was it out of the US at the time?
Yes, in Belize. Yes, we incorporated our mortgage company. By the way, we were a mortgage company for 10 years, and we applied for our banking license. We received our banking license in Belize in 2003. So we've been a bank in Belize for 22 years now, and we're still really a mortgage bank. We do take deposits. but our business is lending the money to North Americans and Europeans who are buying property in Belize, but now also in Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Panama, and throughout the Caribbean. So we're able to serve clients throughout the region because now we're a much bigger institution with more capital and able to do that.
Yeah.
Our development company is based in Belize, but we have
Yeah.
subsidiary companies in Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Panama as
Panama.
well. So we're really
Okay.
multinational at this point.
It's a global brand. And do you
Yeah.
guys focus on just residential or you do commercial real estate?
Yeah, good question. Our primary business is residential, whether it's
Right.
condominiums or single family homes. We do both. We believe that a residential resort community provides the kind of amenities and life and fun that people want in mostly in retirement, but now, and we can talk about the shift in the marketplace to a much younger audience. And I would like to talk about
Yeah.
that because I think it's very relevant to today's investors. But originally, going back, 29 years ago now with our development company, our model was retirees, U.S. and Canadian retirees moving to Belize, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Panama, looking for
Mm.
that, quality of life, cost of living adjustment, warm weather in the tropics, as they retired and moved. And the resort component has a commercial component. That's why I'm talking about that.
Oh,
A lot of times, you want to have food and beverage services. You want to have a hotel. You want to have say a golf course. We built a golf course
yes.
in Nicaragua, right? So you have these
Oh,
commercial elements that are integral to a resort community. We are primarily focused on residential, with one big exception. We have an oceanfront property that we bought back in 1998 in Belize that we are now building a 202 room Marriott resort hotel on. That
wow.
will be exclusively commercial. That hotel is under construction and will be finished by the end of 2027. But that's a sort of the outlier to our business. Our business is normally residential, with the one
Residential.
exception, which is the Marriott resort we're building. Yeah,
I feel like that exception is the start of a new division.
maybe,
Is it definitely?
maybe. But yeah, but it was based on the location, right? Ambergris Key,
Okay.
Belize. It was
Mm-hmm.
based on the timing, that the island
Okay.
needs branded hotel product for the type of clients who are coming there now. So you had
Okay.
this, the property that we owned was perfect on Ambergris Key, and then the timing with the development of that type of traveler, right? The hospitality traveler looking for a branded product. So a lot of the stars lined up for that project. But yeah, I do think, Stephanie, I think we will probably be doing other hotel projects in the future as well.
But Mike, your story is like that of a Superman, and people are quick to envy you. I'm also envying you right now. But I know you'd have gone through a couple of hurdles starting a company in a different environment. So what were the early cultural or regulatory shocks that forced you to rethink your approach at the start of setting up business in Belize?
Yeah, yes, lots of hurdles, tons of hurdles. And the truth is, if there weren't hurdles, anyone could do it, right? And I think that's the
Yeah,
the key. A lot of the stuff like you learned with Rich Dad Poor Dad are mental constructs. They're mental hurdles, right? But if you just say to
definitely.
yourself, I'm going to get through this, I am going to figure out a way to the other side, then the
Mm,
chances of it happening are much, much higher, right? And not every hurdle can be overcome, right? But if they can't, maybe they can be negotiated, or they can be sidestepped, or they can be removed in some other way, right? And I think creativity ultimately is the source of progress, and really in all progress, right? You look at things like patents, right? I mean, that's creativity, whether it's scientific or engineering or you know human ingenuity, right? For a lot of the IP today. Anyway, yeah, we've had tons of challenges. Belize was maybe a great place to start because the language is English, so we didn't have language
yeah.
hurdles. But there were
Okay.
certainly cultural hurdles, institutional hurdles, right? Belize is a very small country, under 400,000 people. And so when you have an economy that's an entire economy that's 400,000 people, you've got systemic challenges, right? Just from a bandwidth standpoint, from a regulatory standpoint, but also from a capacity standpoint. You need a pool of engineers, for example, and and it's not a very big pool to choose from. That's not to say they don't have
Yeah.
great engineers. Belize has great engineers. The challenge is that if there are 7 or 8 major projects going on at the same time, the pool is done. I mean, there are no more engineers, and you can't really go right. You can't go somewhere else and get them, right? Because anyway, so that's been a little bit challenging. I remember at one point we were doing a massive construction project on some condominiums, residential condominiums, and the entire country of Belize ran out of cement. Like, I mean,
Wow.
Stephanie, how do
The
you put
entire
that in a business
country.
plan? Yeah, the entire
You
country ran
can
out of cement. No,
can't
I
make
mean,
this
like
up.
you can't put that in a business plan. It's like
Oh,
I have a saying in my book and my speeches. I say we don't know what we don't know, and like we don't know what we don't know. And one of the things is how could we even think to imagine that the entire country would run out of cement? It's that kind of stuff that again, you have to get creative, or you have to be patient. I mean, that one was just patience, basically. Although we were able to negotiate some contracts in Mexico and get cement kind of at the front of the line, right? But it is what it is. You just sort of roll with those things, and flexibility and patience are really important, and then creativity as well.
yeah. Can we talk about your book for a bit? Because your book, you're
Yes,
advocating for people to travel the world, live abroad. So what are the key tenets you're
that
trying to?
there it is.
You're, yes,
Yes.
you're
Hey,
trying
by the
to.
way, before we go on, I'm
Yeah.
actually not selling my book. I'm not selling my book. I'm actually giving my book away for free.
Oh,
Anybody
that's
on this
fine.
podcast, no, anybody on this podcast can send me an email, and I will send them a link to go to Amazon and download my book. It's on Kindle. You can download my book on Kindle for free. I'll pay for it. If you simply email me, I will get you a copy of my book for free, Amazon Kindle copy. That's all you have to do is send me an email and ask for the book, and I will make sure you get a copy. Because that's how
Wow.
important it is. Because the bottom line is, and get it right the first time. Because look, lots of people buy property overseas. Many of
Yeah.
them do get it right, you know, but some decent percentage don't. And the problem is when people go overseas and have a bad experience, they tell 100 people about it. I bought this property in Mexico and it was a big ripoff, or whatever they say, right? And they tell
Yeah.
100 people about it. And the
Because
problem is that
bad news travel faster.
absolutely, absolutely. And so, so what I want to do, I've made it my mission, my professional mission outside of my corporation,
Wow.
right? We have our corporate mission, right? And then we do a ton of corporate social responsibility. So I have a service mission as well. That's different. But my professional mission, my professional give back is to make sure as many people as possible get a copy of the book and get it right the first time if they're buying property overseas. Because if they do get it right, they'll tell 10 people, which is a win, right? But if they don't get it
Yes.
right, they'll tell 100 people. So the more people that get it right, the better. And that's my goal, is to help as many people as possible. So, yeah.
And I know that basically with your experience, especially in terms of working with experts like yourself, you've met thousands of aspiring experts and investors who want to be in that bubble, who want to like invest abroad. What's the pattern you've
Yep.
noticed between people who thrive abroad versus those who don't and those who struggle? Because some people feel like, oh, I just want to go abroad, work, and go back home and build home. But now you're unlocking a different opportunity and different possibilities. Let them say that, oh, they can actually invest abroad. They don't have to go back home. So what's the mindset you
Yeah.
notice between people who win and those who lose abroad?
Sure. Let me just say that I think that there's a spirit of adventure, right? If I had to say what's the single thread that kind of runs through people who move overseas, invest overseas or move overseas, but or both,
Mm.
right? It's a spirit of adventure. That's the common thread that really weaves all of us together. The one thing, by the way, that even people with the sense of adventure, a spirit of adventure, right? That thread or that fabric that they have, some of those people can get turned around and go home, so to speak, or go back to where they came from. And I
Yeah.
would say it's really based on two things. People like to use the word culture shock. Oh, culture shock, right? I'm going to talk about
Yeah.
that one. Let me talk about that one second. The actual single thing that I have seen more people get turned around on is, when you go to the developing world, right? If you move from the United States to England or U.S. to Canada or whatever, that's not like there's no there's no real issue on this one. But if you move from the developed world to the developing world, what you're going to see is you're going to see poverty up close, right? But poverty
Yes.
doesn't necessarily, I think a lot of times people associate poverty and crime, and that's not a correct assumption in the developing world. Poverty is just poverty. Poverty are just poor people who haven't had the economic opportunity that we've been so blessed with in the United States and Europe, right? We've been
Yes.
totally blessed with abundance and the opportunity to create abundance. And I think in the developing world, that opportunity is lacking in many cases. Not the will, not the desire on the part of people, but the actual path to opportunity or opportunity. And so, so we have poverty, but we don't necessarily have high crime rates. That's the first thing. But the thing that really gets to people is when you move to the developing world, you will have poverty right next to you. You will see and be intimate with poverty. And if that
Yes.
rips your heart out every time you see it, like if you just cry, and I've seen people cry, literally, like talk about it and cry, how they some poor children, whatever, approach them or they whatever, and it just kills them. If that's what happens, living in the developing world is probably not right for you, because who wants that kind of quote unquote misery in their life? I
Yeah.
made a very conscious decision early on. I made the decision when I moved to Nicaragua, or even when I was working in that part of the world. I just made an intellectual decision that I was not going to give anybody any money. Like, no matter if somebody begged, I would smile, I would say good morning, I would give them love, right? I have lots of love to give. I would be free with my love, my happiness, and my smile, but I would not give a penny. And so what it did was it never allowed my heart to come into that equation, right? I mean, again, friendly smile, good
Mm.
morning, good afternoon. Nope, I can't help you
Yes.
today, right? On the other hand, our company, we do a ton of corporate social responsibility. I give personally of money, I give personally of time, but far more important than what I can give, I can leverage who we are as a company to support inbound associations. We do a ton of work with Rotary, for example.
Oh,
When a Rotary club wants to
nice.
come to Nicaragua and do a project of some kind, what we do is we help them arrange their hotels, their bus, so they can travel around. We help them arrange their meals. If they need
Yeah.
if they need a welder, for example, we'll find a welder for them, right? We'll do all of this inbound logistics so that the Rotary Club can come down and do the great things that they want to do without worrying about how to do it, right? Because the
Yeah.
how to do it's the hard part, right? We can facilitate. And so by being there, and our team gives of themselves and on their weekends and evenings to support these kinds of projects during the day too, but
Mm.
it's much more than that. And so, we've been able to support Rotary, Share the Love, which is a distribution group. So we do a ton of work. And so the part of me that says I'm not going to give a penny, allows me to be in that environment and not feel bad about it, but yet be
Yeah.
able to be there and contribute incredibly meaningful ways to the society, to the people, to the country, to the communities that we live and work and in far better than giving somebody a buck or not giving them a buck, right, on the side of the street. There are organizations that can help them, and I think we even
Yeah.
help support some of those organizations that help those people. But giving somebody a buck on the street isn't really going to change anyone's life.
Yeah. It can only go so far. It ends up in a
It,
meal or something, or a pack of cigarettes.
Yeah, a pack of, or even worse, it ends up on the bully on the corner behind the tree that you don't see, who sends out the 10 kids to collect the dollars, and then he takes takes all the dollars from them at the end
Mm.
of the day, right? So I mean, we
That's
know that
true.
kind of stuff goes on as well. So that will send people home. The poverty thing will send people home. But what we encourage people to do when they move overseas is join the Rotary Club, get involved, help with Share the Love, go
Yeah.
work in the local school. We had a guy came down and he taught music. He taught guitar classes to the kids at the local school. And not that that's necessarily going to improve their lives monetarily, but to go from not playing an instrument to playing an instrument, what a
Yeah.
wonderful, fulfilling addition to these children's lives that they can take their whole life, right? Play guitar for an entire life, whether they make money with it or they just love doing it. And so again, we encourage people who move overseas to embed themselves in the larger community, and we facilitate that. We really make it easy to do. In fact, I would even say we almost make it hard for someone not to do. Like they have to say no. Like, hey, come on, we're going to do this. Hey, come on, we're going to do this. We're going out here this week, or the Rotary Club's coming. We're going to go, we're going to go paint a school, or we're going to work with some moms and kids, or whatever it is. And so we really kind of pull people in, and they have to push back, and they can. It's their life, their business, but we make it hard for people to not engage in the community. Because, at the end of the day, quality of life is about the relationships we have. And when you move overseas, you're, as a retiree especially, you're leaving your job, right? That was a big social network for most people, right? In fact, I know for me, my biggest social network is my job, right? I mean, that's where I see most people and know most people, right? But I have neighbors, and we have friends, and people leave their churches or their softball leagues or their soccer clubs or whatever it is, right? So they're leaving this whole social fabric and they're moving someplace new. How do they make new friends? How do they build new community? And so one of the foundational missions of our company is to help people plug in and build new community, build new friendships, build new peer relationships, because at the end of the day, those are what really contribute the most to quality of life. And when people move overseas, I think sometimes it's cost of living, quality of life, better weather, blah 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 blah. But really, it's our friendships and our community that really give us the highest elements of quality of life.
Yeah, essentially what you're saying is first off, have a positive mindset. Secondly, be willing to give, be willing to contribute to society, because when you contribute, you're able to have a sense of community and sense of belonging, and the value adds
Yeah.
up, it stacks up quickly, and it gets back to you. So that's a very good mindset shift. So, but when it comes to international investing and diversification, some people get scared, like, okay, the exchange rates and the crime rates, you're not sure of the unfamiliar economic environment. So how do you help someone to move from that fear of the unknown into the confidence of buying or investing or living abroad?
Yeah, sure. Look, to me, any investment, whether it's domestic or overseas, is foundationally due diligence, right? Due diligence. And one of the problems is when we go outside our home country, we don't know the ground rules. We might know some of the ground rules. It's sort of like, hey, I'm a football player and I know all the rules about football, but I've never played soccer, but I'm going to go play soccer. You know what? I can kind of get it mostly right, but I'm probably going to make a lot of mistakes because I don't know the rules, right? Because it's a different game. And so I think the thing that we counsel people is go slow, proceed with caution, right? It's a yellow light, not a red light. It's not a green light. It's not full on racing, to use a racing analogy. It's not the green flag. Go fast, go fast. No, it's not the red flag. Stop. It's the yellow flag, right? It's caution. Proceed with caution, but proceed, right? And it's due diligence. And you mentioned things like exchange rates. Some countries have open exchange. Other countries have exchange controls, right? And so you have to look at that fundamentally. Like if you make an investment in Brazil, can you get your money out, right? Trinidad, can you get your money out? Maybe yes, maybe no. Sometimes yes, sometimes no, right? I mean, depends on how their central bank is doing and how much money their central bank has. So you have exchange controls, which is maybe hate to call it the worst level, but let's call it the worst level. I personally am not comfortable investing in a country where there are exchange controls, because that means the government gets that government gets to decide whether I get my money or not, right? I don't like that. Then you have exchange, then you have exchange factors, right, which is exchange rates, and those can be volatile, right? They can move a lot, or in some cases, some countries' exchange rates are pegged to currency. A lot of, in the Belize dollar, for example, is pegged to the US dollar. Yes, it's 2-to-1, but there are no exchange rate risks, right? So it's pegged, right? Whereas you have other currencies like the Costa Rican Colony or the Honduran Limpura, right, where they fluctuate quite a bit. But there you can mitigate a lot of the risk by using a company called, I love Money Corp, right? Money Corp. They are a phenomenal exchange rate mitigator They will hedge future exchange rates on a transaction for you. If you know it's going to take 30 days, 60 days, 90 days to close a deal, they'll hedge that for you. In fact,
Oh,
if you've never had them on your podcast, Stephanie, you should. I would be happy to make an introduction. They are
oh,
phenomenal. They do tremendous work for people where there's exchange rate risk. Anyway, but other elements of the financial transaction, just something as simple as title, right? Having
mm,
a lawyer. I'm actually doing some due diligence right now for a client in Honduras, and we're using two attorneys. I'm sorry, they have their own attorney. The developer has their own attorney. We are
yeah.
actually using another closing attorney, and I have a third attorney looking over all the paperwork as sort of a catch-all, right? And so things like title and having your own attorney or your own
Yes.
attorneys, plural, right? I mean, they're just, in fact, the book, I just say the book has a whole set of questions, 30
Wow.
questions, right?
Okay.
30 questions that we should ask
That's a
that
huge
when we're
resource.
buying property overseas, plus a
Yeah.
lot of what I call due diligence hacks outside of the
Okay.
questions themselves, things to look at, things to pay attention to that you might never know. One example, it's not really about investing, but when you go to get a residency in a foreign country, even just like a permanent residency, it can be a hassle. You have to have a lot of documents. The process is whatever, cumbersome sometimes. Usually outside the immigration office, there'll be a bunch of lawyers in really like tents, right? They're just on the side of the street with a tarp or standing on the side of the street, and they're lawyers. And you would say to yourself, no, I want to use a big law firm in town. I don't want to use this guy standing on the street. Actually,
Yes.
you want to use the guy standing on the street because he knows
Yeah, because
everybody inside the building.
he knows everything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. And again, if you're just coming in from the outside, you would say, no way am I using that attorney. I want the big name law firm. Okay, fine.
Mhm.
But if you want to get it done, you want to get it done fast, there it is. So my book's got a lot of little hacks like that as well
Okay.
that you wouldn't think of. And some of them are about residency and other things, but some of them are very specifically about investing and
Okay.
things like having a second lawyer. That's a hack, right? Most people would say, well, the developer has their lawyer. I have my lawyer. That's enough. Maybe, but you know what? For a few extra bucks on a $500,000 transaction to spend another $1,000, like that's
It's a
cheap.
no-brainer.
That's cheap, right? But that second lawyer on your side of the equation might catch something that your first lawyer didn't, and
Mm.
that could be the difference between owning the property or not owning the property or being in a lawsuit with the seller. I mean, like, yeah, just
Yeah,
like
true.
tons of hacks that we wouldn't think of. But the bottom line, Stephanie, the bottom line, proceed with caution.
It's
Yellow
caution.
flag, proceed with caution.
Proceed with caution and have your two-factor authentication. One of one lawyer and another.
I like that. I never heard it said that way, but that's beautiful. May I use that? I like that.
Definitely.
Thank
I think
you. Thank
Money
you.
Cop should pay you for endorsing them because you've done a great job being an ambassador today.
But
So
you know
shout
what?
out to Money.
Yeah, they buy me a drink once in a while. I see them at conferences and they buy me a
Ah,
drink
okay.
because they know I love them. I use them. They know I love them, and so yeah, they're great. Yep.
Okay, then I'll appreciate an introduction at this point because it's like they need to sponsor my
Okay.
show.
Absolutely.
Yeah, amazing. Talking about emerging markets and developing countries, I know that there's a level of due diligence that you have to do in order to feel
Mhm.
safe in such climes. So can you break down the specific, like 2 or 3 red flags and green flags you have to identify before going into business in such countries?
I think maybe the biggest red flag I would have is if a country treats foreigners different than it treats its own citizens for land owning rights. That would be a major red flag. And I'll just give you an example. It doesn't stop other people from buying but Honduras, Honduras in their constitution basically says any property within 40 kilometers of the coast has to be owned by a Honduran. And so, what foreigners do is they set up a Honduran corporation with Honduran directors, and they kind of go around the edges, but it's constitution, so they're kind of going around
Yeah.
the edges of a constitutional law. And I don't know, I don't like that. That doesn't make me comfortable. I mean, if somebody else is comfortable with it, great. In fact, like I said, I'm doing some due diligence on a purchase that somebody's doing in Honduras, but that's them, right? And I explained, they said, we understand. I'm like, great. Then we looked at the other factors. But, Mexico maybe less so, but they have the same kind of law. And if you are a foreigner and you want to buy property along the coast of Mexico, you have to do it inside a bank trust. It's called a fideicomiso. The thing that I would say about Mexico is that process has been time tested for 50, 60, 70 years. And so I think there's enough history, case law history of it, that it's safe. I don't personally like it, but whatever.
It works.
I think it works, and I would own a property in Mexico if I wanted to own one without any real concerns. But that's a big red flag. The other thing would be just what I would call legal consistency. I'm not sure what the right word is, but legal consistency, because you've got rule of law. Let me just say it that way, rule of law, right? But legal consistency, where you can look at case law and you can say, oh yeah, like it all kind of aligns, right? So you don't have these wildly varying, like, oh, over here they ruled against this guy, but here they ruled for this guy. It's the same case, but obviously either somebody paid off the judge or somebody was somebody's brother-in-law or something, right? So consistency into the framework of rule of law would be another red flag or green flag. If you've got good, rule of law and you've got good consistency, that's a green flag. If you don't, it's a red flag. Those two are probably my big ones. How do they treat foreigners? Do they treat them the same as domestics? And rule of law. Because at the end of the day, if you can get title and you've got rule of law, your investment, look, investments are investment. There's risk. Maybe you buy a McDonald's and it does great. Maybe you buy a McDonald's and nobody goes there. I mean, like, right. I mean, like, that's the investment side. But if you buy a McDonald's and you own the land under it, you own the land in the building, because that's the title. And then, if the laws are such that you're not being treated unfairly, then the rest of it's just investment risk, right?
Makes sense. What about green flags? Green flags is saying countries and you'd be like, oh, I absolutely have to invest in this country.
Yeah. A big green flag to me is timing. And I know people talk about market timing. You can't time the market. I think that's true in the stock market. You can't really time the market. But I do think you can, quote unquote, time the developing world. The developing world is in some ways a time machine, and I'll use the Caribbean and Latin America as the example, because that's where I work and it's what I'm most familiar with. If I could take a time machine and go back, 30 or 40 years, let's say 40 years, somebody said, Mike, you could go back in time 40 years. Where would you buy a condo? I would say Bermuda. That's where I'd buy one. I'd buy a condo in Bermuda, right? If I could take a time machine and go back, 30 years, where would you buy a condo? I'd buy a condo in the Cayman Islands or the Turks and Caicos. If I could go back, 25 years, I'd buy a condo in Cancun, Mexico. If I could go back, 15 or 20 years ago, I'd probably buy something in Costa Rica. And so, because each of these countries kind of moves through this progression of popularity, and really, if we're looking at real estate investments, which I do, right? There are many of other kinds of investments too. But real estate investments, you want to be in front of a wave of popularity. You don't want to be too soon. You can be on the bleeding edge, right? And you can wait a long time for something to happen. But if you can kind of catch something as it's moving into the sweet spot of popularity, and right now, Belize is. I mean, 5 years ago, I would have said, nope, it's not in the sweet spot. It's coming. I can see it. I can see it around the bend, but it's not there yet. Belize is right now in the dead center bullseye of the sweet spot. It is popular enough that it cash flows. Lots of airlift, lots of planes flying. They're even talking about direct flights from Frankfurt now. So first European direct flights, right? So like all of this is happening, but the price of real estate hasn't exploded like it has in Cancun or Cayman Islands or Turks and Caicos, or gosh, Bermuda's off the Richter scale for pricing, right? And so you look at a country and you say, like, and so Belize right now is in the sweet spot. If somebody said, well, whatever, what's next? I'd say, it's probably El Salvador. I think El Salvador's coming into the bottom of the sweet spot, or it's getting close maybe, or it is. I don't know, And so if somebody said, well, I'm looking for something that's coming next, I'd say, well, take a look at El Salvador. If somebody said, you know what, I want the deepest value. I want to buy something for the least amount of money possible. And I want to appreciate the most in value over, say, a 10 or 15-year period, I would say look at Nicaragua, right?
Oh,
Nicaragua's it's unpopular. It's not just not popular, it's
it's on top.
unpopular. And so, right? And so you can buy huge homes or tracts of land for a quarter of what you would pay in Costa Rica, which is the same weather, the same ocean, the same everything, 100 miles away. But the popularity of Costa Rica pushes up here. The popularity of Nicaragua puts it here. In
Yeah.
Belize, right in the sweet spot. Salvador's coming next. And so I think, if you're looking for green flags in the international real estate investment world, I would
Yeah.
say look for countries that are either in the sweet spot or coming into the sweet spot, but countries that have moved beyond it, maybe those times are a lot less lucrative. It's not that you shouldn't buy an investment, and you can go to Costa Rica, you can buy a wonderful piece of property, but you're not going to get the appreciation of the asset, and you're not going to get the same yield because you're going to pay more for the asset, right? And
Mm.
so your yield will be lower, but flip side, it's probably going to be more consistent, Stephanie, because you're going to have more consistent occupancy, right, than you will in an emerging destination. So there's always trade-offs, right? And
Yeah.
depending on what you're looking for, if you're looking for predictability and maybe more consistent cash flow, something a little more popular, but you'll pay more for the asset. If you're willing to forego that for appreciation of the asset, then something that's less popular but coming into the sweet spot.
Okay. So what makes the sweet spot for you? Is it just popularity and capital appreciation, or what other things do you look out for to make the
I
sweet
mean,
spot?
certainly it has to check the boxes. It has to treat foreigners the same as it treats domestics when it comes to property rights and the legal
Okay.
system. You've got to have, great rule of law and consistency of legislation and
Yeah.
case law. Those are very, very important. In fact, I think those to me are almost fundamental. If we don't see those, we really don't work in those countries. So that's sort of a baseline. I think the other piece of it is, what is it that you're investing in, right? And how thin slicing are you? I'm going to use Belize as an example. Belize is a whole country, 400,000 people, but Ambergris Key, Belize, this tiny little island, it might represent 1% of the country, right? The size of Ambergris Key might be 1 or 2% of the whole country, but that island generates 70% of all the tourism revenue for the entire country. So you have this tiny
Wow.
little island producing 70% of all the
70%.
tourism revenue. Right. So if you were looking for a tourism investment, right, and maybe you want to have a restaurant, right?
Yeah.
Then Ambergris Key is probably where you want it. I have a lot of people say, well, I would never want to live in a big tourist area. It's noisy, it's crowded. They're like, yeah, I get that. Like, I probably wouldn't want to live there either. But if I'm looking to make money, right, why
Yeah.
do I care whether it's where I would live?
Nice. Exactly.
My analogy is, if I owned a pizza parlor and I hated anchovy pizza, I would still sell anchovy pizza, because it's not about what I like, it's about what the
What
clients
the
like, right?
customer want.
And I'll give you one more example. If I was into franchises, I'm not, but if I was into franchises, I would buy the Dairy Queen franchise for Nicaragua. I mean, again, it's you got to look culturally. You have to say to yourself, what do the people in Nicaragua want? And they like American brands. They're McDonald's, there's Quiznos.
Yeah.
I don't know any British brands, but Latin, Central America is
We
really
ha-
a
we
U.S.
have Greg's. We have Greg's here.
You have Greg's and you have Mark and Spencer too. I like
Marks and
Marks and Spencer. Yeah.
Spencer's.
But if I was looking for a franchise,
Mm-hmm.
opportunity, like, I would look at a place like Nicaragua, right? And so, because they have a big population, 6 million people.
Yeah.
They've got a fairly large, upper and middle class, and they like American brands. There's no Dairy Queen. I would do the Dairy Queen franchise. Again, depending on what somebody was looking for in terms of, investment, cash flow, appreciation. There are lots of levers there, but nuance is important. I guess that's really what I'm trying to get at, Stephanie, is that, you have to look at your investment goals. You have to look at your investment timelines, your experience,
Yeah.
your capital. How much capital do you have, right? And then you have to overlay that with what's happening in the region and where you can best deploy your capital to achieve the kinds of return results that you hope to achieve. It's an investment. You never know, right? But
Yes.
there's a lot of meshing of things to come up with the one thing that would be right for an individual.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
breaking that down into like granular sizes, because that's what shows that you're the expert. You're not using jargons, you're using like everyday words that the average person can pick up and just relate to.
Well,
Really
Stephanie,
helpful.
Thank you. Look, you are asking incredibly insightful questions. Your questions really get to the heart of the matter, and I think that's again a great value that you provide to your listeners. So, well done on your questions. Great questions.
Thank you so much. So let's talk about highs and lows. I know that in your time being a developer, you've had a couple of deals that look good on paper, but turns out a different side. So what's one deal, development or partnership that looked really good on paper, but touch ended up teaching you one of your toughest business lessons? And how did it reshape the way you operate in business today?
Yeah. One thing that's really easy because we're just now finishing it up.
Yeah.
We sold a bunch of properties right before COVID, during COVID, and we did not have a clause in our contract that allowed for price escalation due to
Oh,
inflation, cost of materials. And and our company, we lost probably around $4 million delivering homes to people because look, we have an obligation when we sign a contract, we live by the contract. And so we had people who bought homes from us, condos and homes, but both. And it cost us more money to build them than we collected from the client. And it's a real loss of a financial loss for our company. But that's what you do. When you've been in business
yeah.
29 years and you make a mistake, you step up, you live with it, you deal with it, and we have and we are. But something as simple as having a price escalation clause in our contracts for unforeseen events like COVID and the price of materials going up 30-40%. We now have those contract clauses, but that was an
Okay.
expensive piece of tuition. But
Yeah.
anyway, that's probably the biggest lesson that we've learned, in recent history. Yeah.
Okay. So what's your take on AI in terms of business and in terms of how it's shaping the real estate space? How is it necessarily affecting the way you do business today?
Interesting. I'm too set in my ways to really use AI very much, which is true. I'm much
Yeah.
more of this, you and me, right? We're on the phone
Y-
together, on podcast together,
Yeah.
but we do use it within the organization. And I have several people in the organization that when I need something done with AI, they
Well
very
versed.
quickly are able to, to and you know what? I think it's an incredibly powerful tool to collect data, sort data, analyze data. But at the end of the day, some of the stuff it comes back with, I just shake my head and go, well, that's not right. Because I know it's not right based on real
Mm.
world experience, right? Because AI is pulling from anything and everything out there in the
Yeah.
in the internet world, right? And so it really can't validate the truth of something because it's not alive, it's not experiential, right? It's never done these things. And so I think it's a very powerful tool. It's getting better and it's probably getting more accurate over time, but I think
Yeah.
there's the human element of real world experience and intuition of maybe where things might go next. That's not a capability of AI today. So, I mean, it's evolving quickly, but I
Mm.
love it as a tool for research collection, research analysis. It's powerful and phenomenal. And I think it's going to become more and more relevant to every business, not just my business going forward. But it's a very, very powerful tool. It's like a very sharp knife, right? It's an
Yeah.
extremely sharp knife, but we have to be careful with a sharp knife, right? They cut well. They always say that the
Exactly.
most dangerous knife is a dull knife, and I agree because you're forcing, you might cut yourself. But I actually was in Japan over the summer with my daughter and went to a master swordsmith
Wow.
in a town called Gifu, and we made knives. It was
Really?
awesome. If you're ever yes, if you're yes, I mean all day. Like we took a piece of metal, we heated it up in a forge, and we beat on it with
Wow.
hammers, and we sharpened it and made knives. And they are really, really sharp. I cut my finger with it the other day, my
Sorry.
thumb. Yeah. Hey, it is what it is. But I think AI is like a really, really, really sharp knife, right?
Mm.
It's awesome. but if we don't use it right, we can cut ourselves with it too. So we have to be masters of the tool, and we can't depend only on the tool. It needs adult supervision, maybe. I don't know. Yeah.
Definitely. Talking about, I know you started out being a mortgage banker, and that's the bulk of what you do in your company. So what are the things you look out for in an investment or in a client before you give them funds, before you approve the mortgage? What are the top three things you look out for in order to deal?
Yeah. Well, two things. One, our mortgage lending is based on asset value alone. We do look at the ability to repay. We ask for tax returns, right? So we can see the person has a job, they're making money, they actually have the ability to repay the loan. But we only loan 50% loan to value. So the client has to put up the first half of the money. And so what we know is the client's got a lot of skin in the game, right? They're putting up half the money. We put up the other half of the money. And so we've had very, very few loans go bad because, again, clients want to make sure they've already put up half the money. They want to see this thing through.
Yes.
So I think that's really it. It's actually pretty simple and straightforward. It's do the values match up, and that's a human thing, right? I look at that personally. I'm chair of the loan committee at the bank, and so I look at that very carefully. Like, is the value of the property realistic to the marketplace? And if so, we will lend half of that amount to the buyers. I think, again, pretty straightforward, pretty simple, but really critically important to get that right, of course.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And I know that given your line of work and the position you occupy, you have intel about different countries, different spaces, and the fact that you do strategic land investing shows that you're drawing data and you're investing from an informed perspective. So in terms of infrastructure and policy shift, what indicators tell you that a region is on the brink of becoming the next major expat or investor hotspots or investor hub? What are the things you look out for that says, okay, this is the next place I'm going to put my investments in? I know you've already given us a couple of places to look out for, like El Salvador, Nicaragua. But what are the things you look out for essentially that you used to apply to say, okay, this is the next go-to spot for me?
Yeah, I think there are a couple big indicators. One is airlift, right? I mean, can you get there? Are airlines, are new airlines flying there? Are existing airlines adding routes, right? Adding capacity, right? I mean, if you look at airlift, I think that tells you a lot about a destination, because what it really tells you about is the popularity. Airlines aren't going to open up new routes. They're not going to add more flights unless there's demand from consumers. So you can really see a lot about a destination, any destination in the world, based on airlift, right? So I think that's a powerful indicator. The other thing that I would say is cruise ships in the Caribbean specifically, or anywhere cruise ships go. Are you seeing more cruise ship passengers? And not because cruise ship passengers buy real estate particularly, but what happens is cruise ship passengers come, they get off for the day. Then, some of those people, I mean, very small percentage, but some will say, I want to come back here someday. And when they come back, they might come back for a week or 10 days. Like they rent an apartment or they stay in a hotel. And then some of those people end up saying, well, you know what, this is a really cool place. Maybe I'll come back and live here for a year or buy a property here. So it's a very, thin funnel, right? It gets really thin at the end, but I think cruise ships in the Caribbean certainly drive interest in a destination. Airlift measures interest in a destination. So I think those two things are good indicators in the marketplace.
Wow, these are very amazing metrics, because I had never thought about it that you would be measuring it through the airlifts and the ship cruise. No, I never thought about it. Thank you so much for sharing that. Okay, let's wrap this up. Looking ahead, what does the next chapter of global living look for you? And especially, how do you see Latin America playing a bigger role in personal freedom, investments, and lifestyle that people would make over the next decade or so?
Yeah. Well, look, I think you brought up an interesting word, personal freedom, right? There are a lot of people in the United States, Canada, Europe, who are looking for second residencies, second citizenship. Second citizenships are less prevalent, but second residencies are very, very popular because, quite honestly, they're very affordable. Panama has a great program for about $26,000. You can own a teak investment and get permanent residency in Panama, and that's permanent residency. It's forever. And so you don't. And the nice thing about Panama, for example, is you don't have to be there very much. You can show up in Panama one day every 2 years and maintain a permanent residency. So they make it easy to get, affordable to get, and simple to maintain, right? It's so easy. So Panama is probably my favorite jurisdiction for personal freedom, for Plan B second residencies in the region. Other countries have great digital nomad visas. They make it easy if you want to come live there for a year, have a digital nomad job. You're not taking a job in the local economy, but you're working remotely. So a lot of the countries are now looking at those, and I think those kind of, trend towards maybe the personal freedom aspect, because it gives you the flexibility to live somewhere else, but yet, still maintain ties to your home country. I think the next decade is going to be very interesting. I think more and more people are going to look at properties in the developing world, from Europe, from the US, and from Canada.
And there'll be more digital nomads. There'll be more digital nomads, that's for sure.
Absolutely. And one of the main driving factors is going to be the affordability.
Yeah.
When you can have a quality of life that meets or exceeds your current quality of life in England or the United States or Germany, and you can have it for the same money, or in most cases a lot less, right? Those are very high motivating factors for people to look at living overseas. And it's already happening. It's not going to happen. It's already happening.
Yes.
But the pace of it happening is increasing rapidly. So I think the next decade, we're going to see an absolute explosion in the number of people who are moving overseas, either as digital nomads for a year or two or three, or retiring and moving permanently. The marketplace is already strong, and I think it's going to become incredibly strong, and very, very profitable for people who look into it. I would encourage your listeners to start paying attention to it, take some trips, reach out, get a copy of my book. I'd love to send anyone that wants a copy of my book the link to download it for free. But start to pay attention, start to include this part of the world, this Latin American, Central American part of the world, as part of your radar screen. And I'm guessing that it'll be very lucrative for the folks that do that.
Yeah, and that's something you said at the start of the show. Have an adventurous mind. Be adventurous.
Yes.
Say the yes. Say yes, even though you don't know what yes is going to be like. Just say yes. Take the trip, and you don't know what you're going to find on the other side of the pond. That brings us to the second part of this show, which is the firecracker round. So this is just me hitting you with a bunch of questions, and you hitting me right back with the very first answer that comes to mind.
All right.
So drum roll for this one.
Bang, bang, bang.
What's one country you believe is underrated for investment right now?
Underrated?
What's one country that you believe is underrated for investment right now? Many people are not paying attention to.
Nicaragua.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say
Easy.
that.
Hey,
they should make you the president of Nicaragua at this point.
Yeah. Hey, but hang on. Let me give you one more. Totally.
Okay.
Mongolia.
Bonus. Mongolia. Okay.
Yes,
Why?
Mongolia. Bonus.
Why
yes.
Mongolia? Why Mongolia?
I was there this. Yeah, I was there this summer. I've been wanting to go there for about a decade. It is a country on the move. It is absolutely a country on the move. It's too far away for me to want to do anything there personally or professionally, but being there and seeing it firsthand, I recognize the incredible investment opportunities in Mongolia. It is underrated, unknown. It will be a home run for anybody in that part of the world who wants to work in that part of the world. Mongolia.
Thank you so much. Yep. What's one misconception about living abroad you wish people would drop today?
Well, that it's dangerous. It's not. It's safe. It's a safe look. Crime is local. People always say, "Oh, this place is dangerous. That place is dangerous." Well, you know what? Everywhere's dangerous. If you're out at 4 o'clock in the morning looking for drugs, it's dangerous, right?
Yeah.
So if you're home at bed at 10 o'clock, and you're not wandering around neighborhoods that you shouldn't be in, you're probably going to be safe. And that's really true.
Probably.
I think that's a stereotype that is tough to break.
Okay. So what's the best piece of advice you received as a developer?
Easy. You never get what you expect.
What you expect. Oh, okay. That's high on the money right there. That's a very good one. If you had to start from zero today, which Latin American country would you build in first?
I mean, okay, like as in like right now,
Like,
like if I
yeah,
had to
like
start over again right now,
right
Belize,
now.
Belize.
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 Okay.
We started in Belize 30 years ago and we were too early. Remember, we talked about bleeding edge, right? We were in
Yes.
Belize long before it was popular. It may be El Salvador. It's either Belize or El Salvador because
Okay.
they're both in the sweet spot or getting to the sweet spot. Like, I think knowing what I know now, I would enter the sweet spot of the market, not the way before the sweet spot, right? Because you can wait a long time for things to catch up, right? Yeah.
On the bright side, you've been a forerunner. You were the forerunner of the developments in Belize. So we give
Yep.
you your honor. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you for the work you're doing.
Absolutely.
It's been amazing having you on the pod today. Thank you so much, Mike, for all the wonderful nuggets you dropped today. I feel like I'm a developer and I feel like I'm ready to go to Belize to start investing. Yeah. And there we have it, guys. Mike has basically broken down what it means to live and thrive abroad, not just as an investor, but as an expat and as an adventure seeker, because Mike is basically chasing the adventures. And he said something, never say no, always say yes, because you don't know where yes will take you to. So let's continue to turn knowledge into action and breaks into banks. This has been Breaks and Banks with Steph, and this is me signing out.